Welcome back into the Cubbies Crib Podcast, episode 143 total, but Jake, only episode 12 since you and I have been back at the reins of the podcast. Really quick, a house cleaning note for how the podcast is going to operate moving forward. On nights where the Cubs are playing on Monday or Thursday night, we'll be recording the episode and then dropping it on our YouTube and Apple Podcast channels the following morning. It's a little bit easier to kind of go through what we have to talk about without the backdrop of a Cubs game. Plus, we don't want to be talking about a player and then something happens in the game that just dramatically changes the conversation. So that was part of the reason behind the move. Also, just easier for us to get the clips out and also be attentive to what's going on in the game. So, Jake, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the weekend that was. Cubs swept the Diamondbacks. Jed Hoyer talked. Let's start with Jed Hoyer. He met with the reporters on Friday. He gave an update on Justin Steele. I think when the Steele news first broke, it was lots of doom and gloom. People expecting the worst. People like, of course this happened to Justin Steele. What was nice is I think Hoyer was a breath of fresh air, maybe realizing hey, we knew there was a chance Steele could be back in the rotation in June, but in the back of our minds, we also knew that would have been the perfect scenario. Hoyle lent reason or lent credence to that idea, saying hey, we not were expecting this, but we always figured something could pop up. And a reminder that it's not doomsday. He's still scheduled to be back for the Cubs this season.
Yeah, I mean, if every front office executive reacted like the majority of the fan base, I mean, baseball might be way more interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, a guy coming back from an elbow surgery like that, you have the timeline, you hope it works out, but you have to hope for the best but plan for the worst. And that's why the Cubs stockpiled pitching depth. I don't think any of us expected it to be tested as immediately and severely as it was in April, but there was a plan in place for if this happened, and the pieces are there to weather the storm. And like you said, hopefully Steele does come back. I think we talked about it on the last episode, though. You cannot bet on him coming back. He cannot be your shot in the arm plan.
Right.
I think the front office still has to be aggressive at the trade deadline. Add if they, I would assume that I would be shocked if they didn't add.
Right.
And then Steele is just, the cherry on top if and when he makes his return.
Yeah, 1000%. What the Cubs can't do, and you were just kind of alluding to it, is we can't get to August 3rd and Hoyle points to Steele's return as hey, that's our trade deadline move. That's not what winners do. If you look at a team like the Dodgers, that isn't what the Dodgers would do. They go strengthen a need by actually addressing that need and usually going to the top of the market. I feel like if the Cubs are trending the way that they will, I think we're going to take a page out of the 2016 playbook in terms of Jed being willing to go outside his comfort zone, go to the top of the market to address a need for a starting pitcher, a top of the rotation arm. Of course, this past week, we've seen some catastrophic injuries along those lines. Tarek Skubal, the latest with the Detroit Tigers. Interesting chain of reports on that today. He went from being scratched for precautionary reasons. 17 minutes later, he's having surgery. I think John Heyman was doing a little bit of bidding for Scott Boras today with his reporting. And then Joe Ryan, of course, with the Twins, a popular Cubs trade candidate, is also sidelined with an elbow injury. Same thing that the Cubs have dealt with elbow inflammation. It's never something that you want to hear a pitcher have. It's always seems to be a precursor to something else. But regardless of Scooble and Ryan, this feels like the season where whether it's Jefferson Rojas, Pedro Ramirez, Kevin Alcantara, if there's a top starting pitcher out there for the Cubs to get, I think Jed has to push the chips to the middle of the table.
Yeah, I'd like to think you will, but he's never shown that he will actually do it. So
Right.
I think that the disclaimer I would say is if the asking price for, again, may not even be available, a Sandy Alcantara or somebody at that tier is absolutely insane and Jed refuses to pay it. I wrote about it this morning. I could definitely see him pivoting to more of a middle of the rotation starter just for depth but then shoring up the bullpen. So the team I talked about this morning on cubbiescrib.com was the Boston Red Sox. The sky is literally it's falling, it's on fire, it is just bad. You could you could see the Cubs run it back. They worked 10 years ago, go out and get Aroldis Chapman. I think you could also go and make a play for Sonny Gray, which would just be further depth in that rotation in case Justin Steele doesn't come back. A veteran guy, I think Tommy Hotovy could do some interesting stuff with him. But I think if they don't go get a top of the rotation starter, then they're definitely adding to the late inning mix in the bullpen. If they don't also still add mid rotation help, but I think you're either pushing chips in to lock down the late innings, or you're pushing the chips in to get that front of the rotation arm.
Let's talk about additions to the bullpen. One of the things Hoyle mentioned was that the Cubs are already looking for external options to give them pitching depth. They really don't have it at the moment, which is why I think it's funny because over the past week, we saw 2 former Cubs relievers become available, Carl Edwards Jr., Andrew Chafin. I did a short about each player. Of course, one of the first thing that pops up in the replies is, why would we want this reliever? We've seen the struggles with his command. We've seen the struggles he's had lately. The answer is pretty simple. Right now, the Cubs are rolling out Corbin Martin and Ryan Rollison in innings of consequence. So if you're debating between Corbin Martin, Ryan Rollison, or Andrew Chafin, or potentially Carl Edwards Jr., I lean towards Chafin and Edwards Jr. just more so because of the stuff they have, or in Chafin's case, the experience that he has. The Cubs really can't be picky. We saw that with a move they made over the weekend, claiming Luis Peralta off waivers from the St. Louis Cardinals. A brother of Freddie Peralta. Maybe that helps him this offseason. But for right now, Peralta checks a very necessary box, major league experience, and he's capable of pitching if needed. Jake, is this kind of how we're going to see Hoyer and company operate until we get to the middle of trade season in July?
Yeah, I mean, this is his MO. This isn't the first time he's had to do this. He did it last year to tremendous success. I think, like, typically I laugh at every time at 2016, or even, and Chafin, a little later than that, but like a former Cub hits the open market, he's released, he's DFA'd, whatever it is, especially anything around 2016, Cubs fans go bananas and they want the reunion and they want the feel-good story, and they don't ever put 2 and 2 together that the guy they're getting now is not the guy that was on the team then. I don't know why we can't get that through our collective conscience, but we can't. In this case, though, the Cubs are in such dire straits in terms of pitching depth. Like, if you can get either of them on a minor league deal, you just do it. Right now, you have an open 40-man spot, so you really don't have any reason not to. So, if it doesn't work out, dump them. There's nothing to lose by adding depth and hoping you catch lightning in a bottle. I mean, we saw it last year. Like, there were guys that came up for a month or 2 months and were great. Was it Chris Flexen?
Mm-hmm.
Was like really good.
20 scoreless innings.
Really, really good. And then, like, as soon as it started to flip, Jed's like, cool, get out. You're done.
Yeah.
But, like, you can piece together a broken bullpen for a long time doing that, and just 3-week bursts. I mean, look at how good Riley Martin was when he came up. Like, those 2 weeks were amazing. Who knows what the future holds and how he looks when he comes back from injury. But, like, frankly, at that point, the Cubs really needed that week and a half or 2 weeks out of him. Right. He was great. It's not an ideal way to get through a season, but Jed has shown the ability to locate the right guys to go after. He's had more hits than misses. So if he says, hey, Carl Edwards is the guy, then I think at this point you have to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, you want to buy time until your pitching staff can get healthy. Because right now you still have Hunter Harvey on the IL. You have Caleb Thielbar on the IL. You previously mentioned Riley Martin. Not ideal for a team that entered the offseason with a reworked bullpen. They spent nearly $30 million reconstructing that bullpen. Even Phil Maton, he's back, but he's still trying to work out his early season struggles, trying to get back to the form he was that we previously saw him with the Cardinals and Texas Rangers. At this point, you just got to keep throwing darts at the wall, see what sticks. To your point, no one that you bring in now is probably going to be in the bullpen by the end of the season. But if they give you a stretch where the pitching effective innings, they get you to that point where either Thielbar and Harvey are back or you make an external trade, I think that's a victory for the Cubs. To your point, Jed has had success with that. He's had success with the Tyson Millers, the Drew Pomeranzes. He's capable of finding that early season move for the bullpen to kind of stabilize it until there's a larger move later in the season. And I think that's what we're doing with the claim of Peralta. Maybe they bring in Chafin, maybe they bring in Art Edwards Jr. or someone else, but you just got to keep the revolving door going until you just get healthy and stabilize the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. There's nothing saying a guy you bring in now needs to even be with the team a week from now. Like, just
Right.
whatever you got to do, get your guys healthy, figure out what you have, and then I think in these early season pickups, maybe there is a guy that sticks, like a Drew
Right. Yeah.
Pomeranz, which great. Then by getting him the exposure early in the year and figuring out what you have to add to what you thought you had, then it gives you a much clearer picture on, okay, how all in do I need to be at the deadline? Do I need to really go get a big name reliever, or is it more I need to bridge the gap to Palencia in the ninth? Or is it I have a specific pitch mix or, ready lefty matchup that I need to address? There are long-term benefits to having to do this. You don't want to have to do this, but it can give you a much clearer view of the big picture over the course of 162.
Yeah, completely agree. Let's talk about the good news from the weekend. The Cubs are rolling right now. They just swept the Arizona Diamondbacks. What was cool is everyone made a big deal of Zach Gallen pitching at Wrigley Field this weekend. So endless offseason rumors connecting the Cubs to Gallen. I wrote about it on Friday. If you look at Gallen's numbers for Arizona to start the season, yeah, he had a sub 3.20 ERA, but a lot of his expected metrics weren't good. His fielder independent pitching was close to the 4. He wasn't really striking out. He was walking a ton of hitters. There was regression coming, which brings me to the Cubs offense that we saw this weekend. They're going to take advantage of bad pitching. If you can't get outs, if you can't miss bats, this Cubs offense is going to find ways to beat you. And they did that on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday against the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, it's just a really fun team to watch. Like we talked about it on the last episode. 1 through 9, top to bottom, anybody in that lineup can beat you. And I feel like they feed off each other so well. If you see 2 or 3 guys work deep counts, see a ton of pitches, you get a pitcher in that position where he has to get ahead. Then you have somebody like Moises Ballesteros or Ian Happ waiting to ambush them. And the offense is just doing a lot of things right now. I feel like they're not super dependent on the homer, which is great. They're good at manufacturing runs. That obviously they can definitely get you with the long ball with especially Happ and Mo. But it's just a fun group to watch, and it feels like everything is clicking right now.
I think Sunday's victory officially ended the slump watch for Michael Busch. He had 4 RBIs. Dating back to when he broke his 0 for 30s slump on April 12th, his WRC plus is actually 145 over his last 85 plate appearances. So Michael Busch is back. There's still some work to do against left-handed pitching. What I found interesting writing about Michael Busch today is he's actually having pretty decent at-bats against lefties. He's not really striking out. He is walking 17% of the time. So when it comes to his work against southpaws, it's now simply just making contact. You're having good at bats, kind of like what we saw during his slump. He was having good at bats, but now it's just taking it a step further, making good contact, putting a good swing on the ball. And I think that could be what truly leads to the full breakout of Michael Busch. We've been talking about it since spring training. He was going to be a key contributor to the Cubs starting lineup this season. And I think we're finally starting to see that. And the real Michael Busch is starting to emerge.
Yeah, and I think, it says a lot about the type of player he is that he went through such a brutal slump in April, but he never came out of himself. He never changed his approach at the plate. We've talked about guys who, when they're off, their at-bats look bad, period. But Busch never really checked that box and, not ever really facing lefties aside. Like, he's putting together good at-bats against southpaws. And the fact that he's like learning how to do this on the job is pretty impressive. And I think he is as much of a difference maker as anybody on this team. And when he's clicking and when he's hot, the offense feels like crazy dangerous, especially when he's hitting up near the top of the order. You'd have a starter at a Friday 120 game, just groove one to get ahead to start a game and he'd take you deep. So I think that's also something that I love about this offense is it's so versatile. You can mix and match the batting order in all sorts of different ways. And it seems like, Craig Counsell is doing no wrong right now, and the standings reflect it.
Yeah, you open the door, so let's walk right through it. Craig Counsell, this is arguably the best Cubs roster. Would you say they've had since maybe 2018, 2019, towards
Yeah,
the end of that core? Yeah,
yeah,
so it's easily the best roster we've seen in a long time. Craig Counsell over the last 2 years, it's been a polarizing topic in Chicago. The Cubs, of course, went out of the way to poach him from Milwaukee, making him the richest manager in history at the time. Over the last 2 years, whispers started, is Counsell really worth that money? Is Pat Murphy the true success behind the Brewers? I think for the first time, we're seeing the true Craig Counsell era for the Cubs. He knows his roster up and down. He knows what levels to pull. And sure, there's been tons of success stories over the first month of the Cubs season. Edward Cabrera, Moises Ballesteros. But the work of Counsell can't be overlooked. He's having an incredible start to his third season with the Cubs as a manager. I think the true Counsell era for the Cubs is just beginning.
yeah. I think post 2016, the Cubs fan base is pretty entitled, pretty high and
Very
mighty.
much so.
We used to
Yeah.
think, we kind of think like, hey, the NL Central runs through Chicago, and it hasn't in a long time. So I think
Yeah.
when Counsell was in Milwaukee, and then when we poach him, it was very easy for us to say, well, that makes sense. The only conceivable way the Milwaukee Brewers could be worth a darn is because of Craig Counsell. It can't be that they are
Right.
running one of the tightest organizations in baseball. That just doesn't make sense. So Counsell comes over, the Brewers keep rolling, and all of a sudden, you pull the curtain back and it's like, oh, okay, because they have an endless prospect pipeline of blue chip talent, and they know their limitations financially and have repeatedly used that to their advantage in big trades, trading, all-star caliber players. But yeah, I mean, Counsell's doing no wrong this year. He's worked the bullpen really well. It's helped a ton that like guys like Ben Brown have broken out for him, and that he's getting quality out of Cabrera and Imanaga in the rotation. But he's mixing and matching. He's playing the matchups right, especially with the Shaw Ballesteros combo. Again, the shortcomings, if you want to call it that, in year one, like no, that was a flawed roster that he was given.
Right.
Yes, he always made the right decisions with the Brewers, but most of the time they had really well-rounded rosters, and they knew what roles each guy could play and where to mix and match.
Yeah. When you decided between Devin Williams and Josh Hader at the end of games, I feel like no matter who you choose, you're going to have success.
Yeah, I mean, what a problem to have, man. But like I said, I've never been super anti-Counsell. I think that there's with how he is ingrained in the organization, there wasn't going to be a like, okay, day one, everything changes. He was going to take time to get to know the people, get to know the setup around him, and start to institute the changes that he would want to see. That's why they made him the highest paid manager in baseball at the
Right.
time, is because he was expected to do more than just manage the on-field product. So he's had a few years to do that now, and in the early going here, frankly, against all odds, everything's coming up roses.
Yeah. I would say the pecking order in the Cubs organization right now is probably Jed, Counsell, and then Carter Hawkins. No offense to Carter Hawkins. I just think part of the reason why Counsell's here, to your point, is because they wanted an extended branch between the front office and club op, but not in the way that it was with David Ross, where you essentially have Jed Hoyer telling Ross, like, hey, this is what you're going to do. But more so, it's a partnership where Hoyer says something to Counsell, Counsell says something to Hoyer. They have a baseball
You've got the sliding
debate.
scale, and on one side it's Joe Madden, who thinks front offices should shut up and leave him alone, and then you've got Ross on the other side, and Counsell is the happy medium.
Yeah. Yeah, somewhere in the middle. I also think one of the reasons why Counsell came to the Cubs is one, yes, to implement a lot of things that the Brewers are doing behind the scenes in Chicago. But I think he felt that he could take that a step further with the financial resources that the Cubs have. Of course, we really didn't see that exercise the first 2 years, but now that we're seeing it exercise, the Cubs have identified core players. They went out outside the comfort zone for Alex Bregman. They're keeping Nico Horn around. They're keeping Pico Armstrong around. So now I think we're truly seeing the benefit of Counsell here because the Cubs have a major league roster that's capable of being a World Series contender. Counsell knows that. Counsell has instilled his way top to bottom in the entire organization. So when you're instilling guys number 1 through number 26 on the roster, they know that you might not be in the starting lineup that today, but Counsell's going to call your number. And when he does, you better be ready to succeed. That's what we're seeing with Matt Shaw. That's what we're seeing with Miguel Meyer, Michael Conforto for everything that's going right among the Cubs starters. It's also the role players that are thriving. And that's what Counsell did with Milwaukee is Milwaukee had unknown guys who weren't necessarily starters, but when they got into the game, they made a difference. And we're seeing that with this Cubs team.
Well, and I think part of it too is Cubs fans and diehard sports fans in general live and die with the results on a nightly basis. And
Yeah.
when they see Craig Counsell, when the team is getting their teeth kicked in the first 2 weeks of April, and Counsell isn't screaming, he's not throwing things, he's saying, "Look, there's a ton of talent in this room. It's a long season. It's going to turn." That's not what fans want to hear. But again, just like fans don't run the front office, they also aren't managers for a reason. It's because what players love about playing for Counsell is that he's very straightforward with them. He sets expectations, and he's a calm hand. They don't want the up and down. They don't need a dude calling the shots who's blowing his top every day. So I think that antagonized a lot of Cubs fans in the first year or two, and now they're starting to see the results of that steadiness in the manager spot.
It's a big week for the Cubs and Counsell, starting a 4-game set against the Cincinnati Reds this week. The National League Central, don't look now, is the only division in baseball where every single team is above 500. And we're not talking about the Pirates just being 500. We're talking about the Pirates being multiple games over 500. The Cubs and Reds have exchanged first place over the past couple of weeks. The Brewers are always going to be the Brewers. And even the Cardinals are having a hot start. Jake, are we suddenly looking at the best division in baseball? And remember, this is a division that did have 3 playoff teams last year.
I mean, I think I don't want to say that it's strictly because of the quality of teams in the division. I think there have just been some big misses in other divisions, teams that have just completely tripped over their feet at the starting line. But we talked about this, in one of the first episodes, is that do not sleep on the young talent coming into the National League Central. And you're seeing that in Pittsburgh. You're seeing that in Cincinnati. I am not yet buying what the Cardinals are selling. I don't think they have enough pitching. I don't know that Jordan Walker can possibly sustain this over the course of 6 months. The Brewers, again, I will never doubt the Brewers again as long as I live. But yeah, there is a lot of talent. This isn't the same division that we've seen the last few years. There's a lot of up and coming talent. There's been changes in the dugout. There's just been a lot of the land has shifted a lot in the last few years. And I think I would say, 4 of these teams I would probably believe in, but St. Louis, I'm not buying it.
Yeah, let's bring that conversation on. We're going to end the podcast with a game of contender or pretender for the National League Central. We'll go up and down the division, talking about each team. Jake and I will say if we believe they're a pretender or contender. Jake, let's start with our team, the Chicago Cubs, currently in first place in the division. Contender or pretender for the North side?
Definitely a contender, and it's because of what you talked about 5 minutes ago. It is the fact that they finally used the only advantage that they have over the other 4 teams in this division and actually spent big boy money. That makes a difference. If you can't develop talent as effectively as the teams in your division, then you need to be able to outspend them to go get the big names, to go get the Alex Bregmans of the world. When you do that, good things are going to happen, and we're seeing that already this year. So I'm all in contender.
Yeah, easy. Yeah, easy contender for the Cubs. To your point, we talked about it all offseason. The only way the Cubs can combat the ascension that's happening across the division is being aggressive through trades, through free agent signings. Did that with Bregman. Did that with the trade for Edward Cabrera. I want to zero in on Alex Bregman. His stats haven't exactly been what some were expecting. I would argue that he's been among the unluckiest hitters in baseball. He's had some really good hits and just crazy defensive plays against him. I I was reading a story out of Boston today, more talking about the Red Sox, and they talked about a guy like Bregman, like, hey, you can't just subtract that player from the clubhouse and expect us to keep moving forward. For so many years, Cubs have looked at Kyle Schwarber as, man, we don't have that guy in the clubhouse. Granted, Schwarber on the field is producing at an insane clip, probably on pace to hit over 500 home runs, usually good for 45, 50 home runs. So, like, the player Schwarber is for sure the Cubs miss, but also the person is behind the scenes. It's really felt like the Cubs haven't had that player in a long time. They finally do in Alex Bregman, and I think that's not an undervalued or underrated aspect of this success because it's been talked about, but it just shows you that when you make the right free agent decisions, it's going to pay off in ways beyond just a player's stat line. And Bregman is a key representation of that and speaks to why overall the Cubs are going to be contenders for the whole season.
Yeah, and I think what we both called out the same thing that spending money does matter when you're a big market team like the Cubs. But what I will say, I will put a disclaimer on it and say that does not mean that you can just push aside developing internal talent. The Cubs have to get that pipeline going again,
Right.
because otherwise you're going to hit a point where it feels like the Phillies are getting dangerously close to this, where you have a lot of expensive free agents that you've plugged holes with over the years, and they all start getting older, and there isn't a next wave ready to, take the torch. So spending, good, love it, want to see more of it, but the Cubs need to, primarily they have to develop pitching internally that can stay healthy. But just in general, you're seeing blue chip prospects rise through the systems in Pittsburgh, in Milwaukee, in St. Louis, in Cincinnati. Cubs don't have that right now. I think the closest thing
They
they
do
had
not.
was Owen Casey, and they flipped him to Miami. And I would say Casey had some glaring questions that still need answered. They don't have a can't miss guy and haven't for a while. So that still needs to be fixed.
It also avoids the fall off that happened to the 2016 core because once that core aged, you weren't going to sign them new contracts. You made good decisions there for the most part, but what you lacked was just another blue chip prospect to kind of take over in their place. So the Cubs for years have talked about sustained success. We need to have sustained success. Once the potential window is open, we need to keep it open. If they truly want to do that, then yes, you have to improve the farm system. You have to find that blue chip prospect. It's not going to come through trades. It's going to come through drafting and player development. We need to see the Cubs take a step forward in each of those categories moving forward. It starts with this year's draft. We'll get into it in June, talking about some prospects the Cubs can be into. But that's going to be what truly takes this rebuild, or not even rebuild, but contention window from good to great, is if you can build that pipeline of talent from the minor league system to the majors. And that's a huge aspect to watch for the Cubs moving forward.
Yeah, well said. All right, we'll kick it to the next team here. Let's go with the team in town right now, the Cincinnati Reds. Contender or pretender?
I am going to say pretender with the caveat of that could change later this season. The reason why the Reds are a pretender right now is they have two very good success stories on offense. Ellie De La Cruz is having an amazing season. Sal Stewart is having an impressive rookie season. Outside of that, the offense hasn't done much. The pitching staff is struggling. They can't find the strike zone. They can't really get outs when they need outs. So for those two reasons, I'm going to say the Reds are a pretender. That being said, we'll see what happens when Hunter Green comes back. Hunter Green, when healthy, can be among the best pitchers in baseball. I think that could be a big boost that Cincinnati needs. If they tread water until he comes back, that's a dangerous team. But for right now, I'm going pretender. What say you?
I'm going to go contender, mostly because of the man in the dugout. I think you pair Tito with guys that have really high upside and good things can happen. But again, it's going to come down like Ellie has to do what he's doing for the full season. They need Sal Stewart to not, they need the league to not figure him out halfway through the year. But yeah, Hunter Green is a huge X factor. The pitching staff has got to be better. They're going to need more than Stewart and De La Cruz offensively, but I don't know. Maybe it's the 2016 and me, but like just Tito in general. I think he's it's not even. I think he's a Hall of Fame manager. He's got the experience to not panic in those rough stretches, and I think there's enough talent there that they could sneak in. But again, it could flip in a month or so.
I think Tito is also the difference maker to what we've seen happen with the Reds in recent years. The Reds are always a notorious team that gets out to a hot start in April and May, but they kind of fade away for one reason or another later in the season. I think Tito probably corrects that a little bit this year, and also getting Hunter Green back is going to be a big help. Let's go to one of the surprises of the division. The St. Louis Cardinals are actually playing pretty impressive. 6 games over 500, right there for the Cubs and Reds for first place in the division. A surprise because many of baseball insiders, baseball fans thought that the Cardinals were rebuilding, getting ready to sell at the deadline. Jake, are we buying their success, or is there going to be a regression soon?
I'm not buying this at all. Not at all. I was talking to a guy who's a diehard Cardinals fan today, and even he's not buying it. He's like, no, this is what they're going to do. They get off to a good start, give you hope. It's just not going to play out. And then I also think that even if they're on the fringe, I think this front office is going to be very motivated to sell regardless and, reestablish that prospect system and that pipeline. So maybe they're an April contender, but they're not going to be one in September.
Yeah, same. I'm going with Pretender. We saw it last year. The Cardinals got off to a hot start, and then they kind of just quickly hit a wall and regressed. And to your point, I think Chaim Bloom is a little bit cut from the Jed Hoyer cloth in terms of when he's truly overseeing a team that's rebuilding, he's going to lean towards selling, even if there's a remote possibility that they could contend. I say his heart is still going to be on sell because he sees a long game. I think the Cardinals right now are a World Series contender. Now, I would caution Cubs fans that don't sleep on them, though, have a ascending farm system. Chaim Bloom is a very smart person. I think we're seeing that maybe what went wrong in Boston was stuff beyond his control. And I think that's bad news for the Cubs eventually because it means that the Cardinals will once again be the Cardinals. Maybe not this year, but it's coming up. But for right now, for where they are, for where the roster is, I have to go with Pretender. I'm not buying the success that they're having right away.
No, no. And I think Cubs fans should, I mean, I'm in my mid 30s. This is the first time I can remember in my life that I could go into a season and be like, okay, the Cardinals aren't a favorite or like a legit contender.
Yeah.
I get where they're at in the standings right now. They have a net neutral run differential, so like they are very much treading water. But I think eventually there are going to be some holes in the boat, and they're going to start to take on water, and it's going to go down quickly at a certain point.
Very much so.
All right, moving on. I know you and I both have strong feelings about this team, but let's go to the Steel City. Are the Pittsburgh Pirates legit? Is this the year?
It's so funny because I truly don't know what to think of the Pirates. Like, I thought they had a good offseason. I thought they put together a roster that was competitive. If you squint, I think they could squeeze out a contention. But maybe it's just that young Cubs fan in me, or really the Cubs fan that I've always been that like always likes to discount the Pirates because of the Pirates. They usually always find a way to be the Pirates and ruin it. But maybe against that judgment, I'm going contender. They have an encouraging pitching staff. Their offense is taking a step forward. Brandon Lowe's having a productive season. Ryan O'Hearn looks good. Connell Griffin turned 20 and all of a sudden is turning it around from his offensive struggles to start his career. I'm going contender. Maybe I'm going to look like a fool by the end of the season, but call me crazy. I'm buying what the Pirates are doing.
You know what? We'll be crazy together then, because I'm buying it. I talked about it before the season even started that if I was going to pick one team that wasn't the Brewers to knock the Cubs out of the Central this year, that it would be Pittsburgh. Obviously, what you have in Skeens. I thought their big need was to shore up the offense, and the moves they made seemed to be working outside of Marcell Ozuna. But, I don't know. I want – when I think Pittsburgh Pirates as 3 decades as a Cubs fan, I think Jason Kendall. I think Jake Arrieta absolutely shoving against them in 2015.
Yeah.
And other than that, kind of just a whole lot of irrelevance. So it feels weird to say it, but yeah, I'm buying. I think they're a contender.
Yeah, the true test will be in July. What do they do if they're in contention? Do they actually push their chips in and be buyers at the deadline for the first time in recent memory, or do they tread water? I think that's going to be a big litmus test for Pittsburgh and where they are in terms of their status as a contender. But for right now, I like what they're doing. Jake, let's go to the team that we hate mentioning, more so because of just how good at everything they are. The Milwaukee Brewers, they're injured. They're in last place. It seems they're losing pitching left and right. They're losing star position players left and right. Yet they're only 3.5 games out of the first place. And it's Milwaukee. Like, we've seen them pull voodoo magic in the past. We've seen them get insanely hot. Contender, pretender, Milwaukee.
No, they're no until the season is over and they are not in the playoffs. They are a contender. I will never sleep on the Brewers ever again. They have proven me wrong too many times in the last few years. No, the talent is there. They've got reinforcements coming too. Like they have that the top ceiling talent in the minors. Injuries have been a problem. A big problem. I think the biggest red flag for me was Brandon Woodruff leaving his last start, all of a sudden throwing a fastball in the mid 80s. That seems not great for a guy who's had a long history of injuries and is also on one of the richest single year salaries in Brewers franchise history.
Yeah.
Yeah, not great there, but no, it's too early in the year to call them a pretender. I've been burned too many times thinking I was safe. For now, they are a contender because frankly, they always are. They find a way to do it.
I'm a big Walking Dead fan. The one thing I hated, as much as I loved each of the characters involved, was when Rick let Negan live. I think you had to set an example there. You had to kill Negan and truly just assert your authority as a leader. I say that because until the Brewers are dead, they're always going to be a contender. You can't rule them out. They're always going to find a way to be successful. We've seen it in years past when the chips are stacked up against them. They usually find a way. For that reason, until we get to October, like you mentioned, and the Brewers aren't playing, I'm not buying that they're a pretender. They're going to be a contender. They're going to figure it out. They're going to get through their injuries. And they're just going to be that thorn that they've always been in the Cubs side. And I can't even say that because they've been ahead of the Cubs for most of the past 8 years. So really, the Cubs have been the thorn in the Brewer side. Regardless, this is a season that, like, if we get to October and the Cubs are in first place, I'll say it then, but I'm not saying it now. The Brewers are going to be a contender.
Yeah, I think if the Brewers keep hanging out at the bottom of the division, then I'm just gonna think back to playing high school basketball and our coach. We would be up big on a team, and then we would we knew we were better than a lot of these teams, so we would just kind of throw it on cruise control. And all of a sudden, a 25-point lead at the half, and it's like a 6 or 7 point game with a few to play in the fourth. And he would always just scream at us and be like, "You had your foot on their throats and you didn't step on it. Like you had them. They were on the mat. You could finish the job." So when it's Cubs Brewers and they're head to head this year, if Milwaukee is teetering on whether or not they're in or out, the Cubs have to take care of business. They have to reassert themselves in this division because, like you just said, this division has not run through Chicago for a long time. You can't act like it does. It is run through Milwaukee time and time again. If you have a chance to be the one to take care of business and push the Brewers off the cliff in 26, you have to do it this year.
Yeah, if you want it, you got to take it from Milwaukee. We will figure out if they do later this month. Cubs Brewers for a series of the season. We will be back on Thursday night. As a reminder, with the Cubs playing a day game on Thursday, we will be live. Jake, you'll be traveling back home. We'll have a special guest host in your place. Quick note, please subscribe to the Cubbies Crib Podcast on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star review. Leave some feedback. Leave your review. If you even put a Cubs question in your review, we'll feature it on the podcast. We'll respond. Definitely give us your thoughts on the pod, what you would like to see moving forward. We love to see it. For now, I'm Jordan. That's Jake. Have a good one, Cubs fans.